outstanding and world-class vision and world-class this.
I'm a real leadership geek, honestly. I've spent my whole career reading books and chatting to people.
I just find the whole thing and the announcement, the way it's been announced, bizarre.
If you could move away from a model where teachers are so intensely focused.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Teachers Talk Radio. On this Monday evening, we hope you are well. Tonight, we're going to be talking about some of the biggest stories in education over the last week with a practicing head teacher, Richard Walkden, who is a head teacher of a 2,000-strong high school in Sheffield. And I'm delighted to have him join me tonight. And before we kick off the conversation, just to give you a little bit of an outline on the things we're going to be talking about. We had a story that was very prominent last week about suspensions. And the basic gist of it was that pupils should not automatically be sent home if they're suspended from school and could instead remain on site, the government said. And Bridget Phillipson said, being sent home could mean children retreating to social media and gaming as a reason to keep them on site. So that's the first thing we're going to be talking about. Then we're going to switch our attention to the news that there was a record 459,000 school holiday fines that were issued in England last year. Number of term time holiday fines rose by 4% and accounted for 93% of all fines issued for unauthorized school absence. And I think they've put up actually the fine from £60 to £80 for the school holidays, and that's, I guess, showing that the result of that has been it's actually increased and not gone down. And we're also going to touch on, I guess, issues around those two things: mobile phones, behaviour policies, and what's happening in schools in general. And yeah, welcome, Rich, to Teachers Talk Radio. How are you?
No, welcome, Tom, and thank you for having me on today on this Monday night. So thank you for the invite.
Well, you know, you deserve a medal, first of all, for being a head teacher in the current climate of a 2,000-strong school and talking to me on a Monday night at 7:30. Yeah. So tell us, what sort of drives you to get up in the morning and sort of come back and do it all again the next day?
Listen, I never wanted to be a teacher. I started teaching 27 years ago. And I never thought I'd end up in this chair that I'm sat in now. And it's probably a bit by luck rather than design. But I've been head teacher now at Ecclesfield for 8 years. And I guess what drives me on, it sounds a bit cheesy, but I'm going to say it, is one, the children, making sure that every day you're there, putting that shift in. I live also 30 miles away, which is a double-edged sword. Number one, I'm away from the school. But number two, I quite enjoy the drive in and the drive home. It gives that bit of quality time in the car. But also staff. I've got a really good staff. I've been in the school for 16 years. So I was deputy for 8 before I became the head. So I'm invested in the community, invested in the staff who I'm really proud to serve. And also, and like I said, the children, we've got its challenges. Listen, it's a huge, huge school. It's the biggest school in the city. However, every day is a challenge. It's that alarm going at 6 a.m. It's jumping out of bed knowing that you've got challenges ahead. And the job's got harder. I'm not going to sit here and say it hasn't. The job has got harder. But at the same time, I still fundamentally believe in what education does and the fact that every day in the job that I do, you can make a difference to people's lives. I know it sounds a bit cheesy, but I'm going to go with it because I still genuinely believe that. And if I get cynical, then I think we should probably all stop.
That's a really good answer. Let's kick off then with this news about the suspensions, right? And this idea that they've said that, you know, pupils should not automatically be sent home if they're suspended from school in England. What was your immediate reaction to that idea?
I also did a bit of work on the BBC in the middle of last week on this, and my thoughts haven't changed. I stand by exclusions. I mean, exclusions they're never wanted. My biggest worry is twofold. Number one is the damage in the relationship between home and school, and also the fact that as I said before, children have got one chance at education. Any day miss is absolutely vital. However, I still stand by it. It's maybe not the one student that's being suspended, it's the people that lie underneath that. And I still believe that suspensions have a place in an education and a behaviour policy. They need to be used responsibly. They need to be used in the correct manner for the correct offence. But the idea that a student is not in your school building for a reason, I think stands. And a school like ours, for example, we have a really robust and strong internal isolation system. So it's not as if a student goes from being in the classroom to being at home. There are steps in between that. It's not an exact science. It's not about, exclusion. It's straight home. There are procedures, there are policies, and there are steps to ensure that the exclusion is not used immediately. So last week, I get what they're saying. They're worried about people being at home. I'd also like to put on there the parental responsibility there. One of the biggest worries I've got is the rise at primary, and we've seen that. But I generally believe that the exclusion still has a place in the behaviour policy, not to support staff, but other students, but also the student themselves. It's a period for reflection. It's a time to look at what's happening. One of the most important aspects of an exclusion is that process of getting that student back into the building. That period of reflection, the parents sat with you, the reintegration, the steps that are put in place to try it and avert further exclusions. So the whole process, I think last week, it's not as simple, I think, as it was made out to be, if I'm honest. That's what I feel it is.
This idea of the suspension thing, though, right? And kids being sent home, and if the government are saying that they want them to remain on site rather than be sent home, because obviously a suspension is a short period of time, isn't it? It's a day, it's 2 days, whatever it is, half day even sometimes. So have you got provision for that? Is that something you would do and buy into? And if you did keep those children on site, would that create other issues for you?
I think, number one, it's capacity. And when I say capacity, I mean by staffing. So who's going to staff that? Are the government going to pay for the extra staffing that would be required? It's also a skilled job. I think some people think that it's students just sat in a room. It's a skilled job. You're dealing with students normally at that point there, normally at crisis point, who have erred, who have also feel as though maybe the world's an unjust place. So it's about capacity, about staffing. Who staffs that room in that situation? And also it's room. We're a big school. We've got X amount of classrooms. I'm scrambling around for rooms in schools. It is now. It has to be a room or a place that is fit for purpose, not just a broom cupboard or somewhere where you can fit, 5, 6, whatever many students it may be. So there's numerous issues that are raised with keeping them students on site. I get it, and in theory, it sounds quite a simple idea. However, I don't think that it is. We've got our own internal inclusion facility. It works really well. We've got an individual in there right now who does a wonderful job. But you look at schools, you speak to schools, those facilities tend to have a high turnover of staff because the nature of that job is quite negative. It's not an easy piece of work, and we try to be as restorative as possible in there, and that's the mindset. However, day to day, them rooms could be difficult, they can be busy, and it's not straightforward. So the two things there would be is finances, but capacity of room, and also capacity of who pays for that individual, because that, like I say, it is a skilled job. It's not a straightforward role. That.
Yeah. So you're sort of implying that if you go along with this, you'd need more staff, or you're just saying that the pressure of having more children there would put pressure on the members of staff fulfilling the role in that internal exclusion unit.
I think so, because it's not internal exclusion. It's a student that should be at home and they're back in. So absolutely. And like I said, one of the biggest things you talk to teachers will talk to you about is about finances. It's okay, fine, the idea is there, but who's paying for that? Who's paying for that? And that's an expensive resource. And I sit here as a head teacher and I despise talking about money, but unfortunately, day to day, doing my job, half my conversations involve finances.
Do you think? Okay, we have a show on Teachers Talk Radio every Sunday called Points of View, and we were actually talking about this yesterday. And one of the panelists, I think it was JP, one of the panelists on the show, was talking about the statement from Bridget Phillipson, where she was talking about sending pupils home risks them retreating to social media and gaming. And this particular panelist was saying that that's sort of, he used the term schools are becoming teachers are becoming babysitters, as in he was saying that it's almost like that's a parental thing to sort of stop them from doing that. And by sort of saying we're going to take away that sort of responsibility, I guess, from home, to say we're going to do it in school by stopping you having access to devices. That was his point of view on Point of View. But I wondered what your view on those things that Bridget Phillipson said about the whole social media gaming use when children get suspended. Then maybe, I'm sure they would argue they'd see that as a reward. Maybe for some of them, they go home and they just play games all day.
Yeah, listen, Tom, I take the point on board. What I would say there is where does the parental responsibility come into this on that there? If a student's going home, I think it's left their own devices to go on the phone. The issue there is, what is the root cause of the exclusion? You know, are we saying that schools who are in charge of, education are not fixed terming students from the risk that they're going to go on the mobile phone? Wow. If that's the mindset, then I think the mindset is completely wrong. This is about the root cause of why that student is being excluded, whether it be for violence or 53% of the time, it's persistent disruption. But that's the issue, not the fact is we're going to do it and be a holding bay. And I think JP's made a fair point about schools almost becoming a babysitting service there. So a student doesn't go home and go on his or her mobile phone. So I think it's quite a weak thing to say, if I'm honest. And also, I don't think you'll get much support from head teachers when you hear words like that. I get there's a risk of mobile phones. We'll come on to that. I spent half my life dealing with mobile phone issues and issues that are caused by social media, particularly the Monday morning. Monday mornings used to be quite a quiet time going back over a period of time. Monday mornings between the hours of 8:30 and 10 o'clock, particularly those who deal in pastoral work, will find themselves dealing with issues from social media, mobile phones that have taken place over the weekend. Another example there for you of schools policing home, schools policing society, and schools policing the wider society.
Is that? Are you saying that's a bad thing, or are you just saying that's a thing?
It's a thing. Whether it's good or bad depends on your position. The number of times I'll sit and deal with an issue with parents or with students where social media and mobile phones have been involved is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. You know, my job, the job of education and the job of parents, is to protect childhood. I talk about this all the time. Our job is to protect childhood. Again, it sounds a bit simple, but it's not. That's what the job is about. But the bottom line is, an exclusion is a serious sanction. It's a serious sanction that has been put in place by a head teacher to stop harm of some sort, whether harm to an individual or harm to education. And to then say it's about, we're not doing it because of the risk of using mobile phones, then I'm sorry to tell you, that's where the role of education is becoming blurred, I'm afraid to say.
Let's just pause there and say thanks to our sponsors and supporters on the show today, which is Hachette Learning, who are publishers of professional development books and resources around the world, formerly known as John Catt. You might have heard of them. Please head over to the Hachette Learning website, check out their large collection of CPD books and resources. They're incredible. And we thank them so much for supporting Teachers Talk Radio. And here's one for you, Rich, as well, and your staff. On the 14th of March in Manchester, we have Teachers Talk Connect, which is our free event for teachers. It's free CPD. We've got Ross McGill and Jennifer Webb as the main stage speakers, and we have 50 other speakers in subject strands like English, maths, science, history, RS, oracy, behaviour and inclusion, primary, and many, many more. And it is completely free, and it's in the centre of Manchester on the 14th of March. Just head over to ttradio.org/connect26 to find out more. Coming back to what you were saying about the whole mobile phones issue, and I find that really interesting, what you were saying about the whole change of the Monday morning thing. you know, the change of the routine on the Monday morning because of social media. It's not really something I'd thought about. Can you give us, like, obviously without, you're never going to go into individual cases and all that,
No.
but give us a snapshot of the sort of things. Is it conflicts between students on socials? Is it offensive posts? Is it things they've seen? Like, give us a snapshot of things that they might be talking about there.
It can be all of those, Tom. It can be all of those. One of the biggest ways I've got at times is WhatsApp groups. So you get a situation where you might have 50, 60 individuals in a WhatsApp group. And something that's put instantly on a Friday becomes a massive issue on a Saturday and a Sunday. And by the time you get to school on a Monday, the phone call comes in because such and such won't come to school because this is being said about them on a WhatsApp group. So it tends to be the misuse of TikTok, Instagram, WhatsApp. It's the misuse of these, and it can be the sharing of photographs. It can be various things, and that Monday morning. Between 8:30, it's not every Monday morning. I'm not being dramatic there, but it's a game changer. And what's changed over time for schools is that schools will pick that mess up on a Monday morning, and it was probably dealt with at home in the past. But I think because schools, and I say this to my staff all the time, and I think they thought at first I was joking when I said this, but I genuinely believe it. I think schools have become the fourth emergency service. And I think schools, and I say this again, schools sometimes are a victim of their own success. Schools are permanent. They're there. Staff are there. They're regular faces. I'm very proud to say at our school, there's not much turnover of staff. So they know them. A lot of the parents and a lot of the staff in the school are parents. They live in the community, and so that therefore there's that permanence, there's that relatability. And they will say, I'm sure there's lots of head teachers, lots of pastoral staff, listening, thinking, I can relate to this, but schools will sort it Monday morning, or we'll sort it at school in the morning. And there's more and more of that. But again, it goes back to that, the misuse of mobile phones, irresponsibility, the fact that so many people are connected all the time. We had a phone ban in our school many years ago. And I think, if I'm honest about it, I think it's had a big impact. It's worked. But we can't control what goes on outside the school gates from 3:10 onwards. And weekends, it's a long time, 3 days. And in that 3 days, issues can develop over that period of time. But that hour and a half in the Monday morning can be one of the trickiest parts of the week.
Yeah. I was going to ask you actually about the mobile phone thing. Should schools be mobile phone free, as Bridget Phillipson said?
It goes back to a lot of what gets said at the moment is, in the ideal world, we are a school who is in the middle of North Sheffield. We have 28 feeders. We have students that come in from all over the city. And there's a place for mobile phones in the modern world, as we know. In the hours between 8:30 and 3:10, I agree. I think the schools would be an easier place if there was no mobile phones. But mobile phones need to be managed like anything else in education. They need to be managed. In an ideal world, mobile phones shouldn't be seen by staff from students, because I think that the issues that are brought in to the building far supersede the benefits of the mobile phone. We did a piece of work last year. I'll tell you what it's now, so if you want, where we had 28 students across the 5 year groups who for 28 days didn't have a mobile phone, a smartphone. And it was a piece of work that was really successful. We had 5 staff and the students. And apart from one member of staff who for various reasons didn't get through the project, every single person got through the project. And we're doing it again this year. It's going to be bigger and better this year. And we've done it in conjunction with Sheffield University. And the findings from this piece of work were immense. And we're talking about mental well-being, the kids feeling better about life. And I did a bit of work on BBC Look North, and I had 2 lads with me. One took up fishing and one took up woodwork. And what the family, we did a big piece of reflection work. And what all the kids talked about was, one, they felt happier. And the family units got stronger. The families were a stronger unit. And one parent said to me, "Thank you, I got my child back." And I said, "What do you mean by that?" And it was family time, sat on the kitchen table at 5:30 having a conversation. doing things together as a family because the kids weren't on their mobile phone. Now, it's easy to blame mobile phones for all the ills of the world. I get it. But the piece of work that we did was huge in the fact that the well-being of the kid and the family unit was so much better because of the lack of social media. And like I said, the children had to fill their time up with something. Did they do more schoolwork? I hope they did. But I think what they were doing was sport, pastimes, hobbies, things that were challenging them and filling the time. So mobile phones for me, and I've been in pastoral care all my career, and I've seen the impacts from it from 1998 through to now, and it's enormous, and it terrifies me where it's going to go. I don't worry about schools as such. I think schools will get it right. I think schools will get it right, but the knock-on impact against the wider society, it terrifies me.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen so many stories about sorts of social media and mobile phones and their effect on young people. Of course, there have been counter arguments to that. There have been people saying that, not necessarily saying that phones have a space in schools, but there have been a lot of people sort of saying that, the world of technology, and the world that we're moving into and the world of work that young people are going to be moving into, is it sort of too extreme a reaction, if you like, to sort of, go against all sort of, I don't know, one-to-one devices, technology, iPads, phones, whatever the devices are? Is it sort of going against the way the world's moving technologically?
Possibly it is. I'm doing it this year. This 28 days, I'm going to do it this year. And
okay.
I'm doing it because I've taught the students about it. And yeah. I've spoken to the lady in our school called Liz Hunter, wonderful lady, who leads on this project. And I feel as though I should do it this year. So I'm going to do it this year. And I do worry about it. So, I'm being an hypocrite here, but I look at my phone and think, and I keep thinking, how am I going to get through them 28 days in my school with not having a mobile phone or a smartphone? And I'm going to be honest with you, it does worry me a bit. It does worry me. But I'm a 50-year-old bloke. I'm not a 14-year-old student between the 8 hours of 8:30 and 3:10. So it's very, very different. I'm going to tell you that I am going to do this come hell or high water this 28 days. But I do worry about it because I know that on a day-to-day basis, my mobile phone, is a part of.
But how will you manage sort of emails and stuff like that on the go and like alerts and all that? Are you just going to do it by walkie-talkie or by word of mouth?
I'll do it by my office and by the screen in my office, and listen, that doesn't worry me as much. That it's the wider stuff that worries me. But I'll make it clear to people: you have to email me. I don't have emails on my phone, Tom. It's something that I was really when I look at how I did my job and the way I try and do my job as a head teacher, I've always had no emails on my mobile phone. I know some people get amazed by that, but I make it clear that I don't want emails pop up on my mobile phone. When I leave the job, I like to make sure that there's a separation there. I talk about 30 miles in the drive. So that doesn't worry me. But the day-to-day communication with the mobile phone, with the WhatsApp group, for example, with an SLT that may use that during the course of the day, if required. It's a really, the mobile phone is such a great device if used in the correct way. But
sure,
adults live in a very different world to what children do.
Sure. And in terms of what you were saying there in terms of the emails, then I'm guessing you would just check your emails in your office on a laptop.
100%. I mean, the job that I do is I'm on the go all the time. So I'm on my feet non-stop, but I can nip back to my office as I do on a regular basis. And my life's not, dominated by emails. But the bottom line is that element of the job doesn't worry me that much.
Sure. Okay. I mean, let's move on a little bit from phones to the other big story that came out about the holiday fines.
Yeah.
So this was about a record number of holiday fines being issued last year to parents. So from your perspective as a head teacher, well, first of all, what's happening for you with regards to that? And, from your perspective as a head teacher, do these numbers suggest, in your view, that fines are working, or is it penalising families without really changing behaviours?
Well, number one, it isn't working. I think we're quite clear that as a as a policy of the fine. The fines haven't worked. The numbers are going up. We've seen, we'll come back to that in a minute, but the numbers are going up. So whatever's happening with the fines are not putting people off. The fines are very, very small. So some families can save thousands upon thousands of pounds by taking a holiday in term time. They're not going to be put off by a fine that really, between 80 and 150 pounds. It's not a deterrent for us as a school. And obviously we're a large secondary school, but our figures have dropped ever so slightly. But in 2024-25, we lost 0.62% to holidays. This year, from September the 1st to today, we're at 0.45%. So it's dropped, slightly from what it was. But we're getting hammered on holidays because, they're taking them. And you look at it and think, right, so is it they're increasing? It's not a deterrent. And the problem we've got here is we've got to look back at the source. Why are families taking these holidays? Let's say I'm not daft. I speak to our families all the time, and they'll say to me, well, we're doing this and we're doing that, and we're going for this reason. And I sit there and listen, we're living in difficult times. People the money's not going as far. People are terrified of, the finances and the companies, the holiday companies. It's there. Do the government need to get involved more there and legislate these companies who are offering these holidays in term time? And let's be honest about this. Whatever we do in terms of the fines, they're going to go. So it's back to source. How do we stop this from continuing? And is it legislation to these companies to say that this can't be happening? Because some holidays are 2 or 3 times more expensive in holiday time than term time. These families will go. And, I'm sat as a teacher there thinking, every day is vital. I don't just say this for the sake of it, as though, well, he would say that, wouldn't he? But every single day is vital. But the damage being done in the relationship between school and home is huge, because I sit there and I have this conversation with the family, and we do find, the issue we've got a little bit is the framework the government brought out in 2024 is not consistent. It's a little bit of a postcode lottery in terms of what some local authorities will do and what other local authorities will do. You look at the stats and the data across the country, they're very different depending on where you live in the country. I'm in Yorkshire. Yorkshire has the highest rate of fines in the country. I think it's 103, kids fined per 1,000 kids. In Yorkshire, it's astronomical. London's down to 36. But in Yorkshire, it's at the highest rate in the country. So it's an issue that we've got. And I don't see it going away soon unless the government really do bring legislation that helps schools in dealing with this issue.
How does the process actually work? For people who don't know, how does the process of the holiday fines work from a school perspective?
The fine actually comes from the local authority. It doesn't come from the school itself. So the actual fine itself will be done by the local authority. So they'll apply for a holiday form. They'll put a form to say they're going on holiday, and then the form comes to me as head teacher, and then we speak to the local authority and we make a decision based on the reason and the rationale for the holidays. One of the big things is the number of holidays they've taken. Have they taken them before? How long they're going for? What's the reason? And reasons can be from a poorly relative to armed forces where they've only got a certain amount of time. So there's a variety of different reasons why families will take these holidays. But one of the big things there is the family. Again, I get it all the time. We're a family. We can't go in term time. In holiday time. We can't afford. My husband or my wife can't have time off along with the school holidays. So I get it. I sit there and I'm not, being a horrible demon headmaster. I'm sat there listening to what they're saying, and the rationale and the reasons are all really, really plausible. But it erodes education. I mean, you've seen the stats there. 0.5% of our school attendance figure, absence, is down to holidays.
What percentage is that compared to what percentage is that as a percentage of the overall absence number?
Well, we've as a school pre-pandemic, our attendance figure was around about 95.2. So we got ourselves into a really strong position. The hardest thing we found in the post-pandemic world is attendance. And it's something we are fighting on a daily basis. So our attendance now is around about 91%. So we've got 9% absence, and 0.5% of that his holidays. And like I said, the damage that he's done between family and school is huge. And I'll put on that as well, is if you're a classroom teacher and you've got students at school, it's almost like teaching with a handbrake on. You don't want to, you've got a curriculum to teach. You've got to get through your lessons, get through the work, the content. And it's difficult if you've got numerous students that are not in the building because we're on holiday. And as a member of staff, our job is to remove barriers. But as a member of staff, it's a psychological thing you're teaching, and students aren't there. I think it will impact upon other students as well. And it sounds a bit dramatic, that, but I genuinely believe that. If you've got a lot of students not there, it will affect the quality of the teaching and the pace of the learning. I mean, I grew up in teaching in the late 90s, early 2000s, when students, parents, and rightly would say to me, well, all they're doing that last week is videos anyway and stuff such as this. And I think the profession's worked hard on that. The profession's worked really hard on that to tackle that. So no days wasted. So it's not an end of week where they're sat doing nothing for a week, watching videos. It isn't that. And I think the profession's worked hard on that to make sure that that argument can't be leveled at them. But at the same point, and I'll say this, it worries me a little bit maybe, and again, this is a post-pandemic world, is education as valued as it once was in our homes? And that's another argument as well, where we're taking them out. Whereas I think before, it was an absolute no-no in many ways. I think it's become, and I say it's more acceptable is the wrong word to use, but people do it more regularly now in the post-pandemic world. And that's maybe an issue that education has to deal with. Is it fundamentally intrinsic as it once was? That's another argument that I would talk about.
That brings us nicely onto Ofsted, and they are lumping behaviour and attendance together, aren't they? In their in the framework, and they're basically saying, behaviour and attendance are one of the same. Do you think that's fair?
No, I don't. They're two very different things. I mean, I took from our own perspective as a school. At the moment, we're below national. I'm very, as a school, we behaviour-wise, we've got strong policies, we've got a great pastoral team, a really good staff group, and I'm quite confident about where our behaviour is. Attendance would in the same category would affect our behaviour outcome, but they're two very different beasts, two very different things. So right now, where we are in terms of our attendance would hamper us on that new framework, when the behaviour I feel is in a strong place, but it wouldn't matter on that framework because the attendance will pull it down. So that does worry me, because as far as I can see, and I'm sure a lot of head teachers will agree with me, behaviour and attendance are two very, very different things, and also two very, very different battles.
One head teacher who's relatively near to you, Rich, in the world, David Scales, over in Doncaster. His sort of thing was to crack down on unauthorized absence by checking the bins and the cars, and I almost had this vision of him sort of controlling drones, around like the neighborhood and checking, but on a serious note, what do you think of sort of, is it going to sort of push schools into a situation where, they feel like it's their attendance is solely their response. It's them. It's on them. Attendance.
It's on the staff.
Yeah.
Well,
school staff.
Going back to my colleague Mr. Scales, we've got an attendance team of 3 at Ecclesfield, and these 3 ladies work extremely hard. And they sit there and I watch them, and they go out, they do home visits. We make phone calls, we knock on doors. We do what we need to do to try and get people in the building. That's the job that we've got. And these 3 ladies, they're fantastic. And that figure is really hurting me and the staff, because it's not where we need it to be. And I often say to them, ladies, where would it be if you didn't do your job so well? And I flipped on its head there, because schools they're getting beaten by the attendance figures, and it's a job we've all got. But we work extremely hard, and you mentioned Mr. Scales with these drones out and not. But listen,
he doesn't really have drones.
No, I know. But we're not far off that, because the bottom line is we fundamentally understand that every single day they're immediately hampering their life choices. We talk about social mobility. You asked me a question, the best part of an hour ago about why I do this job in the morning, get out of bed and go to school. I understand it education, you get one shot, and every day you're missing, it's hampering your life chances. It sounds dramatic, but I firmly believe in that. If I didn't, I wouldn't get out of bed in the morning. So going back to the point you've raised there, the responsibility has got to lie with the parents. Fundamentally, it does. But it's almost like results and outcomes of schools. It matters more to the school than it does to the children and the families, and that's maybe where education's gone. And the fact that I do the job to the best of our ability, but you're right, it matters more to us sometimes than it does to other stakeholders.
What you're saying is there's more you feel there's maybe more accountability on you than there is on the kids or the families or anybody
absolutely.
else.
Absolutely. You mentioned Ofsted there. I'm sat there now. You're right. We've gone through the framework. I look at the behaviour and attendance. I know what we do, but I'm thinking, right, I've got an issue there with it. Listen, we're working on it, and it'll go up. I'm sure we'll be all right. But it's a figure that's a KPI that's an absolute game changer. It is. But the accountability on the parents for attendance has got to be there. It's and we talk about this for life, don't we? What's education for? It's a skill for life. And I firmly believe it about attendance. I'll show you a good kid attender. Chances are they'll be a damn fine attender when they're a worker, when they're an adult and they're an employee. That's what we instill into kids at our school. It's all about habits for life. The biggest habit you need in this world is to turn up every day on time and put a shift in. And that's the challenge that we've got.
Yeah, I mean, I guess they, again, to sort of, I don't disagree, by the way, on a personal level with anything you've just said. But, to play devil's advocate, there will be some out there who will say that school as it is now is not appealing to young people. It's not as relevant as it should be to young people. It's still stuck in a sort of Victorian model of doing things. It's, the curriculum is too sort of traditional and too narrow. The lessons are boring, and so on and so forth. And things need to change and evolve in a more radical way. And then, of course, you also have those who will say that schools don't sort of cater for different needs. They don't meet the needs of all the students. They don't meet the SEND needs. They don't meet any needs. And they're not, they're not sort of empathetic enough. They're not personalized enough. I'm reeling off all the different arguments here, Rick.
Absolutely. And I'm getting more grey hairs by the second as you reel off that list you've just said there, and I can see in the screen now I'm looking more and more silver. I get it, and you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right to say that. However, schools are about a sense of belonging. I'm not going to bore you with this, Tom, but on Friday night I left school at 10:30, 11:15. We had a school production with 220 students in it from year 7 through to year 11. And we talk in our school all the time about sense of belonging. School's got to be relevant. I'm sat the other week teaching Macbeth to these students, and I know they're going to go home at 3:10. They're not thinking about Lady Macbeth, and they're going through the TikTok and they're scanning and they're changing tact every 5 seconds. I get it. And schools have got to make sure they're as relevant as they possibly can be. And the thing with this education needs to get is, you're right, it's content, it's curriculum, it's the life opportunities, it's the trips, it's the culture capital, it's the PE, the drama, the music. And that sense of belonging, they walk in that door, this is their school. Whether it's for 5 years, 6 years, this is their school, and they've got a sense of purpose there, and they've got a chance to succeed. And we talk about in our, one of the big values in our school we talk about every single day is called show grit. And we talk about this all the time, about resilience. And it's that thing, and you reeled off all the different things there, Tom, and I get it. But fundamentally, it's about schools offering students them opportunities. And the buy-in's got to be, they see the relevance and the value to getting their backside in that building every day at 20 to 9. That's a hard sell. That's a hard sell. But it comes from every single stakeholder in this country, where it's parents selling it, it's the peers selling it, it's the staff selling it, it's the government selling it, it's the community selling it. And that's a tough sell. But again, I'm going back to that point I raised before, Tom, an hour ago, about being a cynic. And education's about protecting childhood, but it's also about giving students opportunity to be a part of something. And we talk about community a lot at our school. I'm big on community. I'm very proud to serve the community we serve, but we talk about community all the time and being a part of that. And it's not everybody. Listen, I've got some kids who said to me, Mr. Walkden, I get what you're saying to me. I just don't like it. But that was a problem 50 years ago. It was a problem 100 years ago. It'd be a problem in 50 years' time. It's not for everybody. But at the same point there, you know, you think about GCSEs, we've brought in loads of different subjects from construction to engineering to health and social care. So schools are trying to be relevant and change as kids change. But that's an ongoing issue that schools will always be changing. They're always in a state of flux because society and communities are.
Let me ask you a quick question as well. You know, something we've covered before on Teachers Talk Radio quite a bit. Is there, in your view, as a school leader, a complaints crisis for schools at the moment? We've read a lot about AI generated complaints, parents using AI for legal sort of back and forth on emails with staff, but not just that, just a general increase in the amount that maybe people are expecting of schools, almost like a raising of the expectation of what a school should and can do. Do you think there's a complaints crisis, and does that put pressure on you and other people?
Yeah, that's not. Yeah, listen, I've got colleagues all over the city and the county. My past history was in Kirklees, so I know various school leaders across Yorkshire. Yes, it's an ongoing issue because, again, AI has changed the game. Some people who maybe not have the confidence to write an email or to address an issue they felt strongly about. AI has made that easy. It's made the world a much easier place to do that and to hide behind that. We've not, as I touch wood here, because the time that is taken up with complaints is enormous. We've got school leaders at breaking point because they seem to be dealing with complaint after complaint after complaint. It hasn't been an issue for me personally, as it has in other schools that I know, but it does worry me because the culture of complaining is there, you know, and schools, they are funded by, you know, the taxpayer. So they're accountable for the work they do. But the culture to complain is prevalent. It's on the rise. It's easier to complain. And what does worry me is that erosion between, again, the relationships. If I get a complaint, you know, I get an email that does worry me about the nature of it, I will bring the parent in. As you can probably imagine, I quite like talking to them. So my job there would be to bring the parent in and try and address it face to face over the table, rather than doing it through a complaints procedure or with email. But AI has changed the goalposts because it's made it easier to complain. But I think that is a societal thing, Tom. Schools mirror image society and communities. And I think it's not just education. I think it's society per se that we have a complaints culture. And I think schools are a victim of that as much as anywhere is.
You mentioned on Friday about you being in till 10:30 or 11 or whatever it was. And obviously this isn't sort of personal to you, but I've had maybe 3 sort of teacher friends who I've spoken to in the last 2 weeks. And all 3 of them are, you know, keen, enthusiastic. I can't verify they're brilliant teachers, but I'm almost certain they probably are, based on, you know, what they're doing and so on. But all 3 of them are basically thinking of quitting. All 3 of them, at least 2 of them were saying, I look at people doing jobs on the way to work, like refuse collecting or standing on roadsides doing different things, and I look at different jobs on the way to work and I go, I want to do that instead. And you know, one of the key things that comes through is sustainability, that they can't seem to sustain the levels that they need to do in terms of the workload, in terms of the hours, in terms of what they feel they need to do. So I suppose my question is to you twofold. Is it where it's always been for the last 20 years since I started teaching? Has it got worse in terms of the sense that, you know, staff wanting to leave. We're not talking about staff who leave, because we know that 50,000 left, I think, last year or the year before last. We know how many are leaving, but in terms of the number who want to leave and the sustainability of it, can teaching ever be sustainable just because of the nature of the beast?
Someone comes straight from university, Tom, they're going to be 22, 23 years of age. And listen, let's be honest about this. They're going to, the time of age is going to go up and up, and we're going to talk in there. Can a member of staff teach for 42, 43 years to the age of 65, 66? I've been head teacher for 8 years. I think there's been one member of staff gone through at 65. So is it sustainable over that length of the career? No. When you're a teacher, the kids are still 11. They're always 11 to 16. So you're getting older and they're getting younger, or the same age, and you're getting older. So the gap is there. As the job got harder, 100% the job's got harder. I think there's more demands from things like Ofsted. I mean, we've touched on Ofsted, but that framework's come in. Has that made that job any easier? No, I don't think it has. I think the accountability is getting higher. The funding is being cut, so the money's not there. I think everyone thought when the Labour government came in, they'd be coming over the mountain with a bucket load of money for schools. That hasn't happened. So the job, as you mentioned 10 minutes ago, you rolled off that list. Now, the bottom line with it is that the job is getting harder. I spoke to my staff last week about this, and we did a wellbeing survey, and I went through the issues that we've got, and we've got a very, very low staff turnover. I'm really proud of that, but I'm also fully aware that as we get into it, that there's more staff thinking about leaving the profession because the job isn't getting any easier. A primary colleague said to me, and I didn't forget these words, this is about a month ago, and they said to me, "You've no idea what's coming in the post. You have no idea the issues that primary schools are under and the issues they're dealing with that are coming through to you in 4 and 5 years' time." And that comment really stuck with me. And it does what it meant.
What did he mean by that?
Just the fact that the need of children coming in to early years in primary, the basic issues that the students have got. The fact is that the teaching staff aren't trained to cope with the level of need. We're hoping that the SEND white paper and the SEND will hopefully make our job easier in the next few months and years. But there's a crisis coming in many ways because of the funding and because the fact is that the need has never been as great. Schools are expected to deal with so much more than they ever were. There's a knock-on effect there for behaviour, for attendance, for all the things we mentioned before. Is it sustainable? I think that it is, but then I'm saying that, but then again, I've got friends who've got degrees in maths, and I've said to them, "You make an excellent teacher." And they look at me and say, "Why would I go into your job, Rich, when I can get paid this amount of money to do this and be an accountant and X amount of money and start at 9, finish at etc." Now, them people for me are not to be teachers because, again, I'm not going to be corny and cheesy. I'm going back to that point about the root of the job. Why did you get into the job in the first place? This conversation started with you saying to me, "Why did you get out of bed in the morning?" And we talked about me jumping out of bed at 6 in the morning and making that drive in every single day because I want to make a difference in lives. Again, not being cheesy, but that's the job that we do. And it's that. But I understand it. And my job as a head teacher is to remove barriers. I want staff in my building teaching 5 hours a day, 5 days a week, good lessons. That's tough. And as a profession, we have to understand that the job is getting tougher. The pressure's getting tougher. And it's not about remuneration. And listen, who might say I'm a head teacher who gets paid a good wage? I'm not saying that. Remuneration is one part of the deal. We need 6,500 teachers in the next 12, 24 months. I hope the government don't think by throwing loads of money at it that we're going to get the right people in, because it's about getting the right people in the job, the right people in the classrooms or in the wider support staff. I mean, support staff in our school do an unbelievable job. It's getting the right people in the building. But I listen, I'm not going to sit here and say you're wrong, Tom, because I genuinely believe that the job isn't sustainable for a huge long career. We have to make sure the people we've got in the building who are good at their job, we support them. We give them everything we can to make sure they feel supported, the well-being, the perks of the job, shall we say, that they still enjoy the job. Education, teaching's a vocation. They've got to enjoy the job, and that's the day-to-day battle that we've got. But is the job getting harder and tougher? 100% it is, and that's something that I wrestle with every single day of the week in making sure that staff in our school feel supported, they can thrive, challenged, and it's a real worry, Tom. And of all the things we talked about tonight, it's something that I really find difficult, that question, because it does worry me massively.
Yeah. Listen, I've got a few more questions to finish off with, but before we do those, just a second shout out to Hachette Learning, who are our partner and sponsor on the show tonight. Huge thanks to them for sponsoring. If you're interested in your own professional development, whether that be books or resources, then visit the Hachette Learning website, check out their collection of CPD books and resources for any teacher, and they deliver globally. I was just going to ask you about you mentioned this idea of removing of barriers, because my sort of starting point there was, is there something about teaching intrinsically that is just really tough? And because it really needs to be, I say it needs to be, I suppose in its best form, in my opinion, it's a face-to-face activity where you have to go to a building. There has to be some sort of classroom setting, however many students there are in that setting. There has to be that dynamic, in my opinion, for it to be the best it can be. I mean, there's many successful online schools and so on, but I'm just talking about from my point of view. So with that in mind, is there something intrinsic about that's just tough? But also, you mentioned removing barriers, and you've already mentioned Ofsted, you've mentioned a few other things. Is there anything right now, tomorrow, the government could do that would massively help you to keep more teachers teaching? Because you said you've got a great retention rate, and I don't doubt it from speaking to you for as long as I have, just for an hour. I don't doubt it, but there'll be a lot where they're just as passionate as you, they're just as sort of engaged as you are as leaders, but they're struggling with the retention simply because they might have different sorts of behaviour issues, they might have workload pressures, they might be in an Ofsted situation where it's creating more workload or more decisions they have to make or whatever. So my double pronged question is, I guess, is that just the job, as in it's intrinsic, that's what it is? And B, what barriers can the government remove? If they were going to do that next week and they could do it, what would you tell them to do?
So number one, the job is tough. I don't think anybody gets into teaching thinks that the job is easy. I first got the job many years ago, and so I said, you get 13 weeks a year off. Oh, do I? Brilliant. And the job fundamentally is about standing in front of a classroom with 20, 25, 30 young minds there. There's a pressure. You can't hide in teaching. People think about teaching and think what kind of job it is. You can't hide in teaching. Fundamentally, you're right, Tom. You stood there in front of them kids. There are no hiding places, and kids will find you out. The one thing that is great about this job is in that relationship with kids, which I still teach, Tom, as well. Make a note of this. I still love teaching in the classroom. I still teach every single week. I don't think I'm not quite what I was, I don't think, but I still teach.
What subject is it? What subject?
You won't believe this, Tom, but it's English. But and I love it, and I still want to be in the classroom. The nature of the job means that I can't teach as much as what I'd like to, but I still teach every single week. But the job's tough, and that is never going to change. Then 25 people you got in front of you. And do I think the job's going to get harder in some ways? Yes, I do. I think the job, certainly in the short term, is going to get harder, because I look at the comment made by my primary school colleague about what's coming in the post. That comment, and the fact is that you're right. But you talk to the very best teachers on a day-to-day basis, and the rewards they still get from doing that job are huge. The worry I've got in the second part of your question is, what would it? Listen, it's funding to deal with SEND. It's not funding to deal with teachers' wages. I get it. I'm not. Who might say that? I'm a highly paid head teacher, But I'm talking here about fundamentally schools getting what they need to deal with the crisis they've got with the kids in front of them. And I'm not on a lot of it's not secondary school. It's about what's in the early years, what's in the primaries. What do the primaries need for the literacy, the numeracy, the SEND, the HCPs, the needs of the students? We talk about places like, parents wanting support with ADHD and ASD, and there's a 5-year waiting list, or there's a mental health crisis because they want to go to certain agencies where they've been told there's a 4-year waiting list. It's fundamentally getting to the crux of what the issues is and the funding that is needed for our families, our students at that first crisis point, and not having to wait 4 years to get a diagnosis that if they went private, they'd probably get it anyway. It's that. And that's what schools need. They need support in the key areas to make sure that our children and our families get the support as early as possible. Intervention as early as possible. We get students coming to us, Thomas, you'll know this. They come to us at 11 years of age and they've got a reading age of 5. And how can they cope with it? We talk about content and curriculum when the basics is they can't read. And it's this. And those issues that schools are dealing with on a daily basis erode the teaching and learning. It's support for these families and these kids that is really, really needed. And that would make the job so much easier and so much more rewarding. That's where I think the issues are.
Sure.
Amongst other things, so I could talk all day about where he talked about exclusions and keeping kids on site. That's another issue again. I have this feeling that the government think by throwing money at wages that's going to solve the issue. It isn't. Education and teaching is about there in the heart. It's about being in there. It's the wider society support for families, which is the real crux of the issue that we've got.
You mentioned about that value of education thing earlier, and since COVID, it seems to have changed. And I don't think there'd be many people who would disagree with you, particularly in the profession. I don't know about outside, but in the profession, I reckon a lot of people would agree with that in terms of the sort of idea of getting up, getting in there, and the value placed on doing that. As in, 20, 30 years ago, it was like, my God, you can't miss a day for, I remember sort of what my parents were like about, me and my brother with school. Like it was, I remember I once had an after school club that I was in when I was about 14, 15. And it was like for the school production. And I remember one day I decided that I just didn't want to do it. It was rehearsal number 1 or 2. I think it was the first one. And I decided I didn't want to do that. This was after school. It wasn't during the school day.
Yeah.
I got the bus home and I turned up and my mum was like, no, you need to get back on the bus.
Yeah.
Go back to school and literally walk in front of everyone and do that rehearsal right now. I'm not suggesting that's a tiny little microscopic example,
but it's a relevant example.
But I'm saying I think there'd be those out there who would say that sort of more traditional maybe idea about like how crucial it is to sort of show your face and get in there and do school has maybe diminished a little bit. But I'm not sure. Is that down to the pandemic, or is that to do with societal change? Is it will they look back in 30, 40 years, 50 years and say, well, I guess, I don't know. We were talking about this yesterday on Points of View again about how in the 50s it was like rock and roll, wasn't it? It's like, oh God, when we grew up in the 20s and 30s, we were all conforming. We weren't shaking our hips to Elvis Presley, right? What's going on with the young generation? Then there was televisions. Everyone's going to be glued to a TV. No one's going to do anything. No one's going to do homework anymore because people are watching TV. Then it was the internet in the 90s. Now it's smart. Is that true, or is it more, actually things are changing and we have got a bit of a worry in terms of how things are going?
I think that listen, people were at home for a year. People were at home for a year, and I think we went remote, and we're a little bit. The profession got something out of it when I think some parents realise, hey, it's quite tough this teaching, like when you got your kids at a kitchen table trying their best, and after 4 seconds it gives up. There was a bit of that, and the profession got something out of that, which was brilliant. And I think some schools, and I say it's my house school, I genuinely mean this. I used to load these videos during lockdown, and I think as a school we really came together and were a real focal point for our community, and we got something out of it. But the problem was people were used to being at home. I mean, I think back to snow days. This is go with me on this one, Tom. Snow days for me used to be this. Right, it's a nightmare. What am I going to do? I'm going to shut the school. I used to get to about half past 8. I'm thinking, I'm panicking here like mad. What to do? Because people would moan like they don't get. It's not now. Because with remote learning and being at home, and the game's changed. The pandemic changed so much. But one of the things I think that has changed, it was more acceptable to be off. Example now, people working at home. I know you talked 10 minutes ago about seeing the whites of people's eyes in the classroom, and fundamentally that's what their job is. But those people that work at home, are them students at home with them? Yes, sometimes it's that comfort, the students at home going away for the weekend, family time together. We're going away for the weekends, a bit of well-being and family time, and we're going away and taking the Friday off or taking the Monday off. My biggest issue in my school is Fridays and Mondays. It sends shivers down my spine knowing that people aren't going to be in that building on a Friday, Monday, because they might be going away somewhere. And it's that. But I think right now in 2026 in this country, it's been made acceptable to be off. And that's the biggest challenge we've got in education, is fighting that. It's not laissez-faire, that's the wrong thing to say, but as a society, we've made it more acceptable to be off. You told a story about your mother saying you're back on that bus. I remember my father, the man was terrifying. If I said to me, Dad, I'm going to be off school today, Dad, he'd look at me as though I broke my neck. That was it. That's the way that it was. And that's the way that I was brought up. And listen, there's still kids out there who are never off, and we have this massive piece working at those kids. But the wider population and the wider culture as a society, and I said before a million times, Tom, schools echo and mirror society as a society, and it's the same with adults. It's the same with their kids. And the kids now are going to be the parents in 25 years' time. That's another worry for society, that we've made it okay to be off. And as a head teacher, and my kids will tell you this, I'm obsessed about attendance. I talk about it all the time because I know that you get one shot. You get one shot, and every day matters. But am I a bit of a dinosaur on that? Possibly. I hope not. But I say that.
No, again, I think there'll be a lot of people out there not nodding away. There'll also be people who'll say, who'll look at the world of work, for example. There'll be people who say, well, we're preparing young people for the world of work. The world of work is now in some places hybrid, remote. It's less, maybe it's more freelance. There's more. I mean, when I was in school, when I left school in 2003 or whatever it was, the opportunities to sort of be an online freelancer in any sense, it didn't exist. That didn't exist. It was like it was more conventional pathways to work. There wasn't. I mean, listen, the extreme end of this is kids now saying, I want to be a YouTuber. Right? I mean, the chances you can be a YouTuber is quite slim. But
they still got to work, Tom. They still got to turn up. Whether they go into a building or they log onto the screen, they still got to go to work and turn up. And that's what we can't lose sight of. That their job is to turn up. And like I said, the thing that really is the key to what we talk about in like also school, but the profession, you've got to turn up every single day. And there'll be days you feel terrible, the days you feel like muck. But we've got to make sure that our kids understand that day to day, they've got responsibility to themselves, but also to the friends. It worries me when I say to some kids and they'll say, I've not been in for a while, sir. Them kids are going on holiday for 2 weeks or go on holiday for a week. They've got to come back in the building. And coming back in the building for a 12, 13-year-old kid can be quite challenging. Friends move on. If you're not there every day, the friend will find someone else or will move on as a friendship group, because that's what kids do. Kids need reliability and dependability. But it's that thing about being in that building, and it's that sense of belonging. More and more at our school, we talk about that sense of belonging. How do we instill that into our kids to know that every single day they've got to come in the building and not just pass the maths and English, but to actually be a part of something bigger, 220 kids on a Friday night in a school production. They were giving weekends up. They're there every single night rehearsing. They're a part of something. They're a part of something. And that's what schools have to be. It's a big sell, Tom, because they'll go home and go on TikTok if they are doing this, and they go on TikTok and change the screen every 3 seconds. There's no belonging there. There's no belonging there. But the hard sell for the school is being a part of something bigger than them. And that's and the world we live in now, you know, kids can be very egocentric, as we know. And that's a difficult sell. And that's the job that we're in. And that is going to get harder. But then again, I do a lot of work at the university, Tom, Sheffield, with the ECTs. I do a lot of behaviour management stuff and job seeking stuff. There's some fantastic people coming through. And our job is to make sure that we don't get cynical. We make sure that we're invested in them teachers of tomorrow and making sure that we're giving them the tools and the resilience, which is the key word, I think, a lot of this job we talk about today, to make a difference. And that is something that
funnily enough, I had a guest on here about a year ago, and she was great, but she was saying that actually she felt that the new teachers, she said she felt the new teachers generally weren't as resilient. That's what she was saying. She was actually saying no, because her examples were that she was sort of going through, not hell, but she was, I mean, listen, I mean, you know, that sort of, listen, we can talk about thresholds for adults, children, societal sorts of thresholds of what you go through. You know, some of the stuff I think about that I went through in my early career, like my teacher training, for example, my NQT, you know, in Wales and that, it was pretty mad. And I think now people would be like, either, you know, I think maybe more based on what she was saying, because I don't know this because I haven't worked with a lot of new teachers recently, but she was saying that more of them would turn around and go, nah, I'm off. Or as in, not I'm off, I'm staying off, as in I'm leaving teaching. Or they'd sort of maybe kick up a fuss about it, or they don't. You know, I guess she was saying that idea that certain things are part of the job, part and parcel of it. You know,
yeah,
you know, and being able to be resilient about those things, and then work your way through it, establish yourself, and get to a place within a school where you're in a really nice position. And in my first school, that took me like 2 or 3 years of going through stuff to get into a more comfortable space.
Yeah, listen, everyone's experienced it, and I get that. You know, I do a lot of the work at the university, and I see them coming through, and some areas are stronger than others. Let's be honest about this. You see certain areas, and you know, science is a big worry, maths is a continual big worry. The big challenge there is then people at certain degrees, they're going to see the rewards in other occupations. I still see some fantastic people coming through. I've got some at our school now. I think, you know, you're a big star and you're going to go far. But you're right. But that, again, is a society issue. And I remember for years, I went to a really good school in Huddersfield, and no one left the profession. No one left the profession. It was unheard of. Whereas there is that inkling now. And I think maybe people are getting braver. Maybe people are thinking, you know, there's something out there. And I think people maybe reflect a bit more than encouraged to go and see what's out there. It's different. So that does worry me. Again, we mentioned the pandemic a lot. I think people, if they think that there's something better out there, I think maybe they've got the wherewithal, maybe they've got the backing of society's norms to say, you know what, I'm going to look at something else. And they may come back into teaching. Those that come back in, I worry about them because the job moves that fast. If you're out of the job for 2-3 years, you come back in, it's a different world because kids have changed. Listen, kids have changed miraculously in the last, 5 years to 10 years. So there's that. But I think you're right. Listen,
have they changed? I mean, have they changed? Like,
Yeah, I think they have. I think they have. I think kids have changed. I think kids have. I think kids have changed. I definitely think kids have changed.
Because I remember my parents were both teachers, and I always remember them. They used to say to me, "Kids are kids. It doesn't matter where you go. Kids are kids." But they finished in 2007-8 sort of period. That's when they finished up, and I mean, anyone who's taught since 2020, I'm sure would maybe agree with you more than not.
I think so. We spoke to staff who've been teaching 15, 20 years in that bracket. They will tell you 100% that teachers have changed, that teaching has changed. I mean, another example there is part-time. More and more teachers are wanting to go part-time. You know, that's another area of the profession.
I'm part-time, Rich. I'm sorry.
Yeah, exactly. And that's more, and that again goes back to people being reflective.
Do you know what? Do you know what that is, though? Do you know what a lot of that is? I want more PPAs, and I can't get them from school, so I'm literally going to use that time to work. So I'm essentially giving myself a pay cut. Yeah. It comes back to what you said about the money, not the wage, not being the big. Yeah. It's them going, I need a day off to actually feel all right in this job. An extra day off.
The PPA was something I was going to mention. We talked about if the government could bring something in now, what would it be? And it would be more freeze. And I think it's a fundamental argument there. But that thing about being part-time, again, is people get reflective. They're thinking about the work-life balance. What would make me a better teacher? What would make me a better husband or a better partner or a better parent? And sometimes it comes back to that point is working 5 days a week. And anyone who's not a teacher now, I'm thinking now about some of my friends will be saying, oh, no, don't go there. But I'm going to go there and say that the job is that tough. That, you know, that sometimes people want that extra time to make them better at their job. You know, I'm not saying, you know, and I think there's something in that. The knock-on effect of having part-time staff, as we know, but if it makes them a better teacher, then why wouldn't they? And I think that's more on the rise as well, Tom, where we're going to see more and more people want to be part-time.
Yeah, and more flexibility, but again, it's how schools can deliver that, really. I mean, I guess you can let them go home during PPAs, but apart from that, what else can you do to encourage it? You know?
And for schools to manage that is very difficult. You know, the best school in the world, you know, the days of teachers living in the community, there's some our school, don't get me wrong, but there's teachers more and more travel to work. You know, them snow days are not really about the weather. In terms of your local community, it's about can the staff get down that motorway and get into your building, you know, and that's again how the job has changed. You know, I worked at Home Firth High School, beautiful school in Huddersfield many years ago. About 65% of the staff lived in the village. Them days are over, you know, them days are definitely over. Yeah.
Listen, Rich, we could go on all evening, but you've given up a huge chunk of your time, so really, really appreciate it. And you've really, really said a lot of inspiring things as well about, you know, your sort of role as head teacher and what you're trying to do and all that. So really, really appreciate you coming on Teachers Talk Radio, and hope people find this useful, which I'm sure they will. I'm sure there'll be many teachers and school leaders out there who it'll resonate with, and they won't feel as maybe alone in how they're feeling about different things. So thank you very much indeed. And thanks, of course, to everybody who's tuned in. We've had over 200 live viewers across our different channels. So thanks to everybody who's dropped in, whether that be for 10 minutes or the full time we've been talking. Obviously, this will be available as well as a podcast. So do catch up with that. And we're back again tomorrow on TTR with shows from 6 o'clock. So do tune into those as well. And we'll see you again soon. Thanks, Rich, and bye, everybody.
Thank you, Tom. Do that in there.
Outstanding, a world-class vision, world-class this.
I'm a real leadership geek, honestly. I've spent my whole career reading books and chatting to people.
I just find the whole